Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. So a little background about me first. I work as a civil engineer, which means I spend a lot of time reading building codes, municipal regulations, and property law. It's not the most exciting job in the world, but it pays well and I genuinely enjoy the technical aspects of it. I'm also pretty detail-oriented by nature, which comes in handy both at work and in situations like this one. I live in a really nice suburban neighborhood. The houses are all well maintained, the lots are decent sized, and most of the neighbors are friendly people who take pride in their properties. I bought my house about 8 years ago, and it's been my sanctuary ever since. I've put a lot of work into the landscaping, installed a beautiful composite deck in the backyard, and even added a small pool. Everything was perfect until the house next door sold last spring. The previous owners were an elderly couple who had lived there for decades. They were quiet, respectful people who kept their property in good condition. When they moved to a retirement community, I was honestly a little sad to see them go. I should have appreciated them more while they were there. The new owners moved in on a sunny Saturday morning in late April. I first noticed them because of all the luxury cars parked in the driveway and on the street. There was a BMW, a Mercedes, and what looked like a brand new Tesla. I figured they must be having some kind of housewarming party or family gathering. Being a decent neighbor, I decided to introduce myself and maybe bring them a welcome gift. I picked up a nice bottle of wine from my collection and walked over around noon. The woman who answered the door was probably in her early 50s, dressed in expensive-looking athleisure wear with perfectly styled blonde hair. She looked me up and down like I was some kind of door-to-door salesperson. I introduced myself and explained that I lived next door. I offered her the wine and said something about welcoming them to the neighborhood. Her response was curt and dismissive. She basically said thanks and that they were busy unpacking. No invitation to chat, no questions about the neighborhood, nothing. She took the wine and closed the door. Not exactly the warm welcome I was expecting, but I figured maybe they were just stressed from the move. Over the next few weeks, I started to get a better sense of who these people were. The husband was some kind of executive who worked downtown. He drove the BMW and was always on his phone, even when walking from the car to the house. The wife seemed to spend most of her time shopping or getting her nails done based on the various service vehicles that showed up at their place. They clearly had money and wanted everyone to know it. What really started to bug me was their attitude toward the neighborhood. They immediately hired a landscaping company to rip out all the established plants and replace them with trendy, modern stuff. They installed these massive outdoor lights that were way brighter than anyone else's, and they started parking their cars in ways that took up more street space than necessary, like they owned the whole block. But the real problem didn't become apparent until late May, when the weather warmed up and I started spending more time in my backyard. There's this enormous oak tree that sits right on the property line between our houses. Actually, it's technically on their side of the line, but just barely. The thing is probably 80 years old and absolutely massive. The trunk is easily 4 feet in diameter, and the canopy spreads out in all directions. It's honestly a beautiful tree, and I'd always enjoyed the shade it provided. The issue is that about 75% of the tree's canopy hangs over my property. This had never been a problem with the previous owners because we had an understanding. The tree dropped leaves and acorns, and I helped with the cleanup. They paid for professional trimming every few years, and we both benefited from having this majestic tree without either of us bearing the full cost or burden. But with the new neighbors, things were different. By early June, I was starting to notice problems I'd never had before. The tree was dropping an incredible amount of debris into my pool. I was having to skim it twice a day just to keep it cleaned. The gutters on the side of my house facing their property were constantly clogged with leaves and small twigs. And during a few minor storms we had that spring, some fairly large branches had fallen onto my deck, leaving scratches on the composite material that I'd spent good money installing. The final straw came during a particularly windy night in mid-June. I woke up to the sound of something crashing in my backyard. When I went out the next morning to investigate, I found that a branch about the size of my arm had snapped off and landed squarely on one of my patio chairs, completely destroying it. The chair wasn't cheap either. It was part of a matching set I'd bought the previous summer. I realized that this situation needed to be addressed before someone got hurt or before there was more significant property damage. I spent that weekend researching the relevant laws and regulations. In our state, property owners have the right to trim any vegetation that crosses their property line, as long as they don't damage the health of the plant. But given the size and age of this tree, I knew that aggressive trimming could potentially harm it and leave me liable for damages. I decided to take the diplomatic approach first. I drafted a polite letter explaining the situation and proposing a solution. I documented all the damage with photographs and got quotes from 3 certified arborists for professional trimming that would maintain the tree's health while reducing the overhang onto my property. The cost was going to be around $2,000, which I offered to split 50-50 since we'd both benefit from the work. I sent the letter via certified mail so I'd have proof of delivery. I also included copies of all the damage photos and the arborist quotes. I thought I was being more than reasonable. Their response came via email 3 days later. It was a single sentence that said the tree was on their property and I should not touch it. No discussion, no acknowledgement of the damage, no willingness to compromise, just a flat refusal to engage with the problem. I decided to try one more time, this time in person. I waited until I saw both of them in their backyard the following Saturday afternoon and walked over to the fence line. I brought the photos and quotes with me, thinking that seeing the documentation might change their minds. The conversation did not go well. The wife immediately got defensive and told me that the tree was a beautiful, natural feature that added value to their property. She said they had no intention of trimming it just because I was having a few maintenance issues. The husband was even worse. He basically told me that if debris was falling on my side, that was my problem to deal with. He said I was free to trim anything hanging over my property line, but if I damaged their tree in the process, they would sue me for the full value of the tree, which he claimed could be tens of thousands of dollars. The way he said it made it clear that this was a calculated response. They knew that aggressive trimming would ruin the tree's appearance and potentially harm its health, putting me at legal risk. They were essentially daring me to take action while threatening legal consequences if I did. I walked away from that conversation pretty frustrated. These people clearly had no interest in being good neighbors or finding a reasonable solution. They wanted all the benefits of owning this massive tree without any of the responsibilities that came with it. That night, I sat in my home office staring at my computer screen trying to figure out what to do next. I could hire an arborist to trim just the branches over my property, but that would leave the tree looking lopsided and might harm its health. I could just live with the ongoing damage and maintenance issues, but that didn't seem fair either. Or I could explore other options. That's when I remembered something from my early days as an engineer, when I was working on a municipal project involving historic preservation. I recalled reading about various city ordinances related to significant trees and vegetation. Most people don't realize that many municipalities have regulations protecting certain trees, especially older ones that are considered part of the community's natural heritage. I spent the next several hours digging through the city's municipal code online. It's not exactly light reading, but my engineering background helped me navigate the legal language. What I found was very interesting. Our city has an ordinance classifying certain trees as protected natural monuments. The designation applies to trees over a certain age and size that are deemed to have historical or environmental significance. Once a tree is classified as a monument, it becomes subject to special regulations. The property owner can't remove or significantly alter it without permits. But more importantly, the city becomes responsible for ensuring the tree doesn't pose a safety hazard to the community. The process for getting a tree designated as a monument is pretty straightforward. Any resident can request an evaluation by submitting a formal application to the Parks and Recreation Department. If the city arborist determines that the tree meets the criteria, it gets added to the official registry of protected trees. But here's the really interesting part that I discovered buried in the fine print. Once a tree is designated as a monument, the city has the authority to order maintenance work if the tree poses any potential safety hazard. This includes trimming branches that could fall and cause property damage or personal injury. The city can order this work to be done immediately, and the property owner has no say in the matter. I read through the relevant sections of the municipal code several times to make sure I understood it correctly. Then I started researching the specific criteria for monument designation. The tree had to be at least 50 years old, have a trunk diameter of at least 3 feet, and be considered significant to the local ecosystem or community character. The oak tree in question definitely met all these requirements. It was clearly much older than 50 years, probably dating back to the 1940s based on its size. The trunk was massive, easily exceeding the 3-foot minimum diameter, and it was definitely a significant part of the neighborhood's character. I'd heard other neighbors comment on what a beautiful tree it was. The next step was to document the safety hazards the tree posed in its current state. I spent the next week carefully photographing every dead branch, every area where the canopy overhung structures, and every piece of debris that fell. I measured distances and took notes about wind patterns and storm damage. I wanted to build an ironclad case that this tree, while beautiful, needed professional maintenance to ensure public safety. I also researched the arborists certified to work on monument trees. It turns out that once a tree gets this designation, only specially licensed professionals can perform any maintenance work on it. These aren't your average tree trimming services, they're specialists who understand both the environmental regulations and the proper techniques for maintaining significant trees. After a week of preparation, I submitted my application to have the tree evaluated for monument status. I included detailed photos, measurements, documentation of the tree's age and historical significance, and a comprehensive report on the safety hazards it currently posed. I made it clear that I wasn't trying to have the tree removed, quite the opposite. I wanted it properly maintained and protected for future generations. The application process took about 2 weeks. During that time, a city arborist came out to inspect the tree. I made sure to be available when he arrived so I could point out all the areas of concern. He spent about an hour examining the tree from every angle, taking his own photos and measurements. The arborist was actually quite impressed with the tree. He confirmed that it was probably close to 80 years old and was definitely significant enough to qualify for monument status. He also agreed that there were several safety concerns that needed to be addressed. There were multiple dead branches in the canopy, some of which were hanging over my roof and deck area. The tree hadn't been professionally pruned in years, and there was clear evidence of storm damage that needed attention. 2 days after the inspection, I received a letter from the Parks and Recreation Department informing me that the tree had been officially designated as Protected Natural Monument number 247. The letter included information about the regulations that now applied to the tree and contact information for certified arborists who could perform any necessary maintenance work. More importantly, the letter stated that the city had identified several safety hazards that required immediate attention. A professional pruning crew would be dispatched within 2 weeks to address these concerns. The work would focus on removing dead or damaged branches and reducing the risk of future storm damage, particularly in areas where the tree overhung structures or public spaces. I have to admit, I felt pretty satisfied when I read that letter. My entitled neighbors had refused to be reasonable about maintaining their tree, so now the city was going to handle it for them. And since it was now a protected monument, they couldn't complain about the city's decision or try to override it. The timing worked out perfectly. I made sure to be home on the day the city crew arrived so I could watch the whole process unfold. It was quite a production. They showed up with 2 bucket trucks, a chipper, and a crew of 6 certified arborists. They set up traffic cones and caution tape to create a work zone that extended into both our properties. The crew chief was a professional who clearly knew his stuff. He spent about 30 minutes walking around the tree and marking which branches needed to be removed. He explained to me that they were going to do what's called a hazard reduction pruning, which involves removing dead, damaged, or potentially dangerous branches while maintaining the tree's natural shape and health. I happened to be working from home that day, so I had a front row seat to watch the entire operation. The crew worked methodically, starting with the obviously dead branches and then moving on to areas where healthy branches posed potential hazards. They were particularly thorough in clearing the areas over my roof and deck, removing several large limbs that could have caused serious damage if they'd fallen during a storm. The neighbors weren't home when the crew arrived, but they showed up right around lunchtime. I was standing in my yard, ostensibly checking my mail, but really just enjoying the show, when their BMW pulled into the driveway. I could see the shock on their faces when they realized what was happening. The wife got out of the car first and immediately started walking toward the crew chief. I couldn't hear everything that was said, but I could tell from her body language that she was not happy. She was gesturing animatedly and pointing at the tree. The crew chief remained calm and professional throughout the conversation. After a few minutes, the husband joined the discussion. He seemed to be taking a more aggressive approach, and I could hear his voice getting louder. At one point, he pulled out his phone, presumably to call someone who he thought could stop the work. The crew chief handled the situation perfectly. He showed them the official work order from the city and explained that the tree had been designated as a protected monument. He told them that the pruning was being done to address safety hazards that had been identified during the official evaluation process. He made it clear that this wasn't optional. It was a city order that had to be carried out. The husband spent about 20 minutes on his phone, probably calling the city and anyone else he could think of who might be able to help him. But there was nothing he could do. The paperwork was all in order, the work had been properly authorized, and the crew had the legal authority to proceed. I have to say, watching their frustration was pretty satisfying. These were people who were used to getting their way, who thought their money and status meant they could ignore problems and force other people to deal with the consequences. But municipal law doesn't care how much money you have or how important you think you are. The pruning work took most of the day. By the time the crew finished, they had removed an enormous amount of dead and potentially dangerous material from the tree. The pile of debris they hauled away was impressive. I estimated at least 2 full truckloads of branches and smaller material. The tree looked completely different when they were done. It was still massive and beautiful, but now it had a much cleaner, healthier appearance. More importantly, from my perspective, the overhang onto my property had been dramatically reduced. The crew had removed all the problematic branches while leaving enough canopy to maintain the tree's natural shape and health. As the crew was packing up their equipment, the chief came over to talk to me. He explained that the tree was now on the city's maintenance schedule and would be inspected annually. Any future pruning or care would be handled by certified professionals according to the monument tree protocols. He also mentioned that the property owners were now prohibited from doing any work on the tree themselves. Everything had to go through the city. That evening, I sat on my deck enjoying a beer and admiring the view. For the first time in months, I didn't have to worry about branches falling on me or debris raining down into my pool. The tree was still there, providing shade and beauty, but now it was being properly maintained by professionals who knew what they were doing. The neighbors were conspicuously absent from their backyard for the next several days. I imagine they were pretty upset about losing control over their majestic natural feature. But from my perspective, the situation had worked out perfectly. The tree was protected, the safety hazards had been addressed, and I no longer had to deal with the ongoing damage and maintenance issues. A few weeks later, I ran into the husband at the local grocery store. He saw me and immediately changed direction to avoid any interaction. I couldn't help but smile a little at his reaction. These were people who had been so confident in their ability to ignore their responsibilities and force me to deal with the consequences. Now they were stuck with a tree that they couldn't control, being maintained on the city's schedule according to professional standards. The best part is that the monument designation is permanent. That tree will be protected and properly maintained for as long as it stands, regardless of who owns the property. Future owners won't be able to remove it or neglect its maintenance the way my current neighbors had been doing. I learned a lot from this experience about the importance of knowing your rights and understanding the regulatory landscape. As an engineer, I was already comfortable reading municipal codes and legal documents, but I'd never really thought about how that knowledge could be applied to everyday problems like neighbor disputes. The situation also reinforced my belief in the power of working within the system rather than against it. I could have taken an adversarial approach, hired my own tree service to aggressively trim the branches over my property, potentially damaging the tree and creating a legal mess. Instead, I found a solution that addressed the safety concerns while actually protecting the tree for the long term. My entitled neighbors had been so focused on asserting their property rights and refusing to compromise that they ended up losing control of their tree entirely. If they had been willing to work with me from the beginning, we could have hired an arborist to do some moderate trimming and everyone would have been happy. Instead, their stubborn refusal to be reasonable neighbors led to a much more dramatic outcome. The irony isn't lost on me. They wanted to own and control this beautiful tree without any of the responsibilities that come with that ownership. They thought they could force me to deal with all the problems while they enjoyed all the benefits. But their selfishness and entitlement backfired spectacularly. Now the tree belongs to the entire community as a protected monument. It will be maintained by professionals according to proper standards, funded through city resources rather than private property owner expenses. They lost their exclusive claim to something they had been so possessive about. Looking back, I think this outcome was probably better for everyone involved, including the tree itself. It's now protected from neglect or improper maintenance. It will receive regular professional care to ensure its health and longevity, and it will continue to be a beautiful part of the neighborhood for generations to come. As for my neighbors, they've become much quieter since the monument designation went into effect. They still live next door, but they've stopped with the ostentatious displays and inconsiderate behavior. I think losing control of their precious tree was a humbling experience that reminded them they're part of a community, not lords of their own private kingdom. The tree continues to drop some leaves and the occasional acorn onto my property, but it's a manageable amount now that the dead and overgrown branches have been removed. My pool stays much cleaner, my gutters don't clog up constantly, and I don't have to worry about large branches falling onto my deck or roof. Every time I look at that tree now, I feel a sense of satisfaction. Not because I won some petty victory over my neighbors, but because I found a solution that protected something beautiful while addressing legitimate safety concerns. The tree is healthier, the neighborhood is safer, and everyone benefits from having this magnificent natural monument properly maintained. It's funny how things work out sometimes. My neighbors thought they were so clever, refusing to compromise and threatening legal action if I dared to touch their tree. They probably assumed I'd either give up or do something rash that would give them grounds to sue me. Instead, I did my homework, worked within the system, and found a solution that was completely legal and proper. Now they're stuck with the consequences of their own unreasonableness, and there's absolutely nothing they can do about it. The municipal monument designation process exists for good reasons. It protects significant natural features while ensuring they don't pose safety risks to the community. My neighbor's tree was a perfect candidate for this protection, and the fact that they had been neglecting its maintenance made the safety argument even stronger. I sometimes wonder if they've learned anything from this experience. Do they understand that being a good neighbor requires compromise and cooperation? Do they realize that their money and status don't exempt them from civic responsibilities? Or are they still just bitter about losing control of their tree? Honestly, I don't really care what they've learned or how they feel about it. What matters is that the problem got solved in a way that was fair and legal. The tree is protected, the safety issues have been addressed, and I can enjoy my property without constantly dealing with damage and debris. The whole situation also gave me a much better appreciation for municipal government and the regulatory framework that protects communities. Before this experience, I had never really thought about tree protection ordinances or monument designations. Now I understand how these systems work and why they exist. It's also made me more aware of my rights and responsibilities as a property owner. I've started paying closer attention to other municipal codes that might be relevant to my situation. You never know when that kind of knowledge might come in handy. But mostly, this experience just reinforced something I already believed about dealing with difficult people. When someone is being unreasonable and refusing to compromise, sometimes the best approach is to find a way to work around them entirely. My neighbors thought they held all the cards because the tree was technically on their property. They never imagined that there might be other stakeholders who could override their decisions. The city's interest in protecting significant natural features and ensuring public safety trumped their property rights in this particular situation. That's exactly how it should work in a civilized community. Individual property owners have rights, but those rights aren't absolute when they conflict with broader community interests. My neighbors learned that lesson the hard way. They could have maintained control over their tree by being responsible owners and good neighbors. Instead, their selfishness and entitlement led to them losing that control entirely. The tree now belongs to all of us, and it will be cared for properly regardless of what they want or don't want. The next one is a malicious compliance story. 13 years ago, on my very first job, I was hired as a network administrator at a newly established state-owned company. Everything was new there, including processes to request office accessories. So I was settled in an office room with bare minimum office accessories. So I wrote down several simple items to request them from support department. At then, it was just a guy. Later, it turned into a approximately 30 people department. Items included simple things such as facial tissues, cloth hanger, it was winter and I had nowhere to put my jacket, headset, 3 colors of pen, and a whiteboard and markers and wiper. The support department guy took a look at the list and continued with excuses about each item. Facial tissue are not for non-managers. Pens you can request only blue once a week if you bring the previous empty pen. Whiteboard and its accessories are also for managers, so is the cloth hanger, like non-managers are not allowed to have a jacket. And for the headset, he just laughed like, "Welcome to a state-owned company, young one." I just realized how different are desks of non-managers and managers. It was these simple things, and I really didn't care spending myself. I just was wondering why others haven't yet. So the next day I came with a facial tissue box with a beautiful design, a really good short cloth hanger for near my seat, good pens of all colors, and a light white glasses whiteboard plus some markers to hang behind my chair, my own gaming headset, and a nice plate full of my hand-chosen sweets. My chair looked perfect. I really mean it, especially when all other desks in other rooms were just copy-pastes of the same sick idea. It was even looking better than managers' desks. By the end of that day, every manager and non-manager that came to my room, their first impression was looking jealously to everything for several seconds, and then ask me, "How did support department gave me these items?" My answer, just normally, with some pride in my tone, replying, "The company's rules are written by beggars. These are my own, and it costed me nothing to make my room look like this." The next day, support department guy came to my room and told me, "Take all your own stuff home. I will give you the same as everyone." I replied, "But I'm not a manager." He said, "We changed the rules. Everyone deserves these things now." The next one is an entitled people story. My sister has this friend named Liza, both 26. Liza has always had crush on our brother Philip. Philip is 33 and has no kids. Liza has 3 kids by 2 different men. So my sister Liza and I were doing some early Christmas shopping. I was going down the list of what I was planning on getting everyone. When Philip came up, Liza said I should get him coal. I asked why. She tells me that she has been dropping hints to Philip that they should spend time together during upcoming holidays. Philip wasn't picking up her hints, so Liza flat out asked him to be with her during Thanksgiving and Christmas, like get to know her and her kids and family during the holidays. Philip told her no. He usually spends time out the country anyways. So I asked Liza if she thinks Philip should get coal because he rejected her, and she says, honestly, I kinda always thought Philip was gay, but now I got other suspicions. I looked at my sister in the rearview mirror like, you not gonna check your friend? So my sister asks, what suspicions? Liza said, don't play dumb, y'all. If an adult man doesn't like adult women, there's only 2 other options. I saw my sister wasn't going to say anything to her, so I did. I asked her, so because my brother doesn't want to be you, he's either gay or a pedo, she said. It's not even that he doesn't want to be with me, he won't even give it a chance. That's weird and not fair. He won't give us a chance because I have kids. So I'm like, yeah, if Philip dated you, he'd become an immediate dad. Like day 1. That's crazy responsibility for anyone. Then Liza cuts me off and is like, Philip is a 33-year-old man and needs some damn responsibility. She was yelling, so I yelled back, his responsibility is not going to be your damn kids. Then my sister finally speaks up just to tell us to calm down, and I was getting taken home. I get home and was telling my mom and Philip about it. We had a laugh. It's just crazy she's upset my brother won't date her. She tries to slander his name, calling him a possible pedo or a gay man because he has no interest in her. Edit. I keep getting asked why I hang with Liza. Liza is my sister's friend. My sister is going through mental health and addiction issues. My sister is not ready for help. We can't force her to do anything, so we just keep her close to make sure she's safe. She's family. Liza is a friend that comes in and out of my sister's life. When she's out, my sister is fine and works to better herself. When she's in, my sister finds herself in chaos and trouble. I also got asked about my brother's feeling towards the pedo comment. He literally doesn't care. He's got a job in another country and will be out the USA by February. You could slap him right now and you wouldn't ruin his day. Please stop asking why I didn't drive myself. Cars are expensive and I'm poor. Someone pointed out a pedophile joke. I didn't even catch it. My brother's name is actually Philip. Anyway, thank you for watching.